Hello, and welcome to Module 9. In this lecture, we'll discuss the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act, which I'll refer to as CERCLA. CERCLA addresses issues with the release of hazardous materials to the environment and who will bear the financial burden for cleanup. Let's take a step back. Recall RCRA's purpose is to prevent a release of hazardous material by regulating the chain of custody of the material. But the reality is that releases do occur. In fact, an estimated 39 million people, about 13% of the U.S. population, live within 3 miles of a hazardous waste site. When releases do occur, 2 other federal environmental laws are triggered. The first is CERCLA, and the other is the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act. Let's start with CERCLA. It's enormous in scope. In fact, CERCLA involves more lawyers and court time than any other environmental law. This is because there are usually dozens of parties responsible for contaminating a site. A good place to begin in understanding CERCLA is the Love Canal, New York disaster. I want you to think about a chemical plant that goes out of business in the 1950s and sells its property to the county for $1. The county builds a school on this property, and over time it sells part of the land to a developer who then builds a subdivision of about 100 homes on the property. Sometime in the late 1970s, the area gets soaked with non-stop rain. Suddenly, people's basements are flooding with foul-smelling chemicals. The authorities are called in and they find more than 21,000 tons of toxic industrial waste consisting of 80 chemical compounds. It makes national headlines around the country. The homeowners are livid. They can't move because no one wants to buy their homes. The general sentiment is that someone must pay for this disaster. The authorities discovered that the original owner of the land, the Hooker Chemical and Plastics Corporation, simply buried chemicals on the site. The company is long gone, bankrupt, and there's no one to sue. So the state and county foot the bill to relocate over 1,000 families in the vicinity, and the homes were demolished. This was Love Canal, New York, a place with an actual canal that kids would swim in. 2 years after this incident, in 1980, Congress enacted CERCLA. Soon, we would uncover many more love canals around the country. I need to distinguish CERCLA from other laws we've discussed or will discuss. First, some environmental laws are triggered at the proposal stage and are based on the precautionary principle, such as NEPA. Then there are environmental laws that regulate manufacture and use, such as the Toxic Substance Control Act, which we'll cover next week. Then there's the Waste Handling Law, which is RCRA. Then there's waste discharge laws, emissions coming out of some type of production, as in the Clean Air Act or the Clean Water Act. CERCLA involves retroactive substance remediation because there's been a release into the environment that applies across the board to hazardous waste, substances, and air pollutants. When there's been a release of any of these materials into the environment, it's a good bet that another law failed. One mistake often made about CERCLA is that it applies only to waste. It applies to more than just waste, substances, chemicals, and air pollutants. It's multimedia in that it covers toxic and hazardous substances regulated under these other laws. Today, there are over 40,000 Superfund or hazardous waste sites, with about 1,300 sites on the National Priorities List, that is the most highly contaminated sites, and about 50 proposed sites. The states of New York and New Jersey have the largest number of people living within 3 miles of hazardous waste sites.